good as the MLT sandwiches when the mutton's really
Mutton's nice and lean. Oh, that's so
The finest wings west of the Mississippi.
Sponsored by Country Bob's Restaurant.
crispy and nice and moist on the inside.
Let's do this.
We're back.
Yeah, man. Good to be back.
Are you a ready, aim kind of guy? Or are you a ready, fire, aim kind of guy when it comes to your business decisions?
Come on.
Welcome back to another episode of the Entrepreneurial Family Man Podcast. We're just four guys who are crazy about our lives. We love our kids, and we want to kill it in business. And this show is just about those important topics, how we blend them together, the things that we do to move each of those big areas forward in our life.
Good to be back after schlepping around McCluskey's farm. How many miles did we walk?
20,000 step day that one day. That was pretty awesome.
No one was shot or run over by a four-wheeler, so I'd call it a success.
Yeah. Speaking of being shot, I can't even remember any people hitting targets very well. And
Not until the guy was put in your hand.
Come on. Wild Bill Hickok here is picking teeth off of a cow skull. My goodness.
we found a dead carcass of a cow. We started plinking with a .22 pistol.
I just needed the point blank range, and we didn't get it that close.
We spent all that time together in the woods at McCluskeyville. And so we're coming off of a really great weekend. We have a lot of momentum, just building rapport and trust. We shared a whole bunch of meals together. We laughed.
We can't move on from that without sending a shout out to Rachel McCluskey. My goodness. The only thing I lost momentum in is eating less because her food is so stinking good.
Make sure you don't let the cat out of the bag on all the secret sauces she's got. She's got the marshmallow one, the garlic one. That's proprietary. Like, I think her cookbook's going to come out. We need to not.
Oh, we'll promote it and get an affiliate link. It'll be great.
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
That sauce on those crepes was pretty epic.
It's amazing.
It was a blast having you guys here, honestly. All the guys flew out here to St. Louis and drove up to spend a few days here on the farm, foothills of the Ozark Mountains. We went into town to the incubator, the building that we have for a small business incubator, but mostly we hung around here on the farm, did some crazy four-wheeling, a lot of hiking, plinking with guns. Yeah, it was pretty epic, pretty hilarious. A lot of eating, a lot of late night talking and laughing, and dreaming and vision casting and all the bonding that happens at a time like that.
So we need a reset. I forgot the topic. I was just thinking about the wings at Country Bob. So can you refresh me?
How do you approach business decisions? Number one, you take inventory. Does it align with your values and vision? You know, speaking of our time on the farm, this was an opportunity where we talked about EFM and our projections for and vision for EFM and what we're going to do going forward. And a lot of that conversation came back to the values and vision that we're living out. How does that align with what we're doing individually in our businesses and then corporately within EFM? But what do you guys do when it comes to taking inventory on a possible business decision in front of you?
The right thing to do is exactly what we did on the farm. We asked ourselves a series of questions like, how are we doing so far and where we want to go? And if we're doing the right things, are we still holding that original vision that was compelling us forward? Remember that moment up in McCluskey's office where we were sitting around the couch and we're just talking about where we wanted to go? We almost had to hold ourselves back from taking a whole bunch of action so that we wouldn't start doing things that weren't aligned with our vision. I think that's the same thing that we need to do when we're thinking about big growth in our business. A big opportunity comes and be like, ho. Does this go with what we originally set out to do, or have we changed what we've originally set out to do to say yes to this?
Jamie, that was a good example of it. That when we came up here to the office and sat around talking, we were talking about things about which we're passionate. But passion doesn't necessarily mean that it's in alignment with the bigger vision and the core values that are mostly what we have to align our lives around, or we wind up off on some rabbit trail somewhere chasing down something else. We're really excited about it, but we got no ability to deliver on the main things, keeping the main things the main things.
You guys as listeners would be laughing your fannies off if you could see what's going on here on the screen. McGreevy and Niemeyer just left because they're laughing so hard they're probably peeing their pants. And me and McCluskey have no idea what's going on. So I think we should just call this the Jamie and McCluskey show and just keep going on without these knuckleheads. What do you say about it?
I liked your ho ho ho. It just stuck in my head.
I don't know what that was. Anyway, McCluskey, I don't know if Chris can give you the admin and you can just mute these knuckleheads and we can keep going on this.
8-wing.
I'm thinking about before we got to the farm, I was so hopeful about making these big decisions about things that we were going to launch, events we're going to do with EFM. And then we got sitting around saying, this is really great what we're doing. It feels like a reset back before you were on there, McCluskey, of us at the Crab Shack with Dan Miller saying we wanted to change the world and reach millions of people in the first year. And then Dan, his advice was, why are you doing this? Would you guys do this for free if it was just the four of you guys having a mastermind group and living life deeply? And we all said a resounding yes to that question. And it seemed like that was a defining moment, again, like the Crab Shack that we had up in your office, McCluskey, that we said, we have to keep our families first, keep our main businesses thriving with our spouses, be dating our wives, all these things that we're doing.
Yeah, it was actually a little bit surprising because when you think about getting to work and getting clear on where you're going to go, my thought is automatically, okay, what action steps are we going to take? What are we going to dive into? And what new project are we going to take on so we can accomplish that and get closer to our vision? And what happened with us is our vision actually pulled us back and helped us find clarity that we don't necessarily need a project here. We don't need to take this massive step forward. We need to value what's already going on and focus on that, on maintaining that so we can move forward in a healthy way. And so that's an interesting point, right? That sometimes this step of taking inventory on your values and vision means taking a breath and stepping back and finding clarity versus taking these big action steps.
Oh, that's hard to do for me.
As business leaders, as entrepreneurs, with that kind of vision, you're always going to see opportunities in front of you. There are going to be problems that you want to solve, but you're so right what you guys just shared there in terms of getting back to that alignment with your values. If this project is going to require X amount of time, that's going to take X amount of time away from what I'm already doing, how I'm already serving my wife or my kids. And so that was something that we talked about, frankly, with EFM. And we've talked about that with each other on other business ventures that are in front of us. I remember when I came around you guys and said, hey, I need a few minutes to sort out this big merger idea I've got in front of me. That was super helpful to come to you after doing the work to compare sort of two opportunities, how they affected me personally, professionally, my family, my time, my finances, and to just sort that out and say, okay, guys, this is what I'm seeing. Point out some blind spots, point out some things that where is there misalignment? And it was super valuable for me. And I know that we've done that with each other a couple times.
It's so hard for me to do that, but it feels so right when we do it. I'm just thinking about that defining moment, both at the Crab Shack and at McCluskey's. When you hold that original vision that you had and you actually know that you're walking in alignment with it and you decide that you're going to step back a little bit, it's one of those things where it doesn't actually feel right. It does feel right, but it's not exactly what we want, right?
Yeah, I think the struggle that we're finding is that all of it is pieces and parts of our heart. We're talking about here vision and values. Where do those come from? From your core, from your heart, the things that matter most. Passion. Where does passion come from? From your heart. But sometimes the things about which we're passionate actually can take us away from the things that are our core values or our core vision. They would just be fun. They would be exciting. They would be new and crazy and out of the box or whatever, but not necessarily moving us toward those things that matter most. I got to give an illustrative point here. Last night, I was out to dinner with our 25-year-old son, Colin. He is home on college break right now. He graduates this year from a program that was an extended move into cinematography. And he was recently in just a sweet offer of a position doing exactly what he was training for. And he chose to step back from it. Having tasted of it, done it for a while, realizing the good as well as the other that wasn't quite aligned with him. What we talked about last night for a good 2 hours was his process of exactly what we're talking about here today. He said, Dad, I looked at that. I looked at the money of it. I looked at the time commitment of it. And then I listened to the things that are my bigger vision for this season of my life, from now on into my 30s. And he said, I just recognized that they were not aligned, so I voluntarily stepped down from that position. I did brainstorming. He said I listed out more than 50 things, 2 sheets of paper. I just filled them with things, projects and activities, business things that I want to do. And I started whittling them down, praying over them, bouncing them off of friends, and I came up with 5. And he enumerated to me the 5 that he was focused on for now. And that thing that he had been doing would have absolutely robbed the time, the energy, the focus from his ability to do any of those other 5. Would he have made money from it? Oh, yeah. But it would have stolen everything else. I think that's part of the challenge, is that it's not evaluating the good from the bad. It's the good from the better from the best. That's the challenge.
Man, that's so cool. Colin is 25 and he's exploring his values and making decisions this way. I mean, that is awesome, McCluskey. I love that story. By the way, McCluskey word of the week, everybody, illustrative.
Yeah. Yeah. We all have heard that many times. It's not a typical McCluskey word that we actually have to think about how to pronounce it. We've heard it, but.
Well, maybe you have, man. You're moving up in the world over there in Franklin, Tennessee with all the uppities. I'm still stuck here in Western New York. Well, you mentioned something else in there, too, is going through the details and doing some of that work to know even what this decision entails. That's another point we want to hit as well, is doing the work, crunching the numbers, looking at all those details and really knowing what you're dealing with here. How have you guys done that? I mean, there's a lot of things that we could turn a blind eye to, but if we're not looking at all the facts, then we're missing out here.
The story that McCluskey gave with Colin of coming up, doing that mindstorming activity where he actually wrote down the 50 ideas, and then he sought wisdom by pulling out his sheet and sliding over the table to his dad. I mean, that's a perfect example of what we should be doing as we move along. That is impressive that a 25-year-old man is doing that at that age. Talk about avoiding pain by learning from other people's mistakes and doing that at a young age. That is awesome.
Right. Because you know what I was doing at his age? I was figuring out life by trial and error. I was like, well, I'll give this a shot. And I mean, by the time I got to 30, I had never been in the same job for even 2 years in a row. I was just, nope, not that either. Well, I'll try this. Nope, not that either. And it was, I mean, that'll work eventually. It's a whole lot more painful. And I'm sure that I lost out on opportunities that never visit you again if you miss a particular season because you're over distracted with some shiny thing on the side that kind of seemed like it might maybe be the next thing, but you weren't really carefully evaluating its value, its merit. It was so cool to hear Colin say, Dad, I love that you've always said the enemy of the best is most often the good. I'm just really trying to figure out what's the best for the season. It's so cool to hear your own words come back to you from one of your kids when they get to this age.
Yeah, what Colin did there is, I mean, that really is rolling up sleeves and doing the work. It's a lot of guys don't want to do this in terms of putting the pen to paper and, like he's just said, putting 2 sheets of 50 points together. You know, sometimes it's crunching the numbers on a business decision. Other times it's going back to those visions and values and how is this going to affect it? You know, Jamie and Michael, I know both of you have looked at recent issues relating to real estate and Airbnb opportunities. And how has that worked for you in terms of running some numbers and sort of crunching the details of what this decision could entail?
For me, this is an exercise to do what Colin did. I don't even want to make a list of some of these things and areas that I've really dropped the ball with before. Like on a couple episodes before, I talked about buying that house with the hole in the roof, and we were all laughing at it. But McCluskey talking about the good being the enemy of the best. I looked at 3 houses and just bought the one that I liked the most. I wasn't making a list. I wasn't asking myself about how this is going to affect myself in the future. Just lean in and take the time at the beginning to count the cost. McGreevy's done that really well right in front of us in the last several months, looking at a whole bunch of different houses. And he had several deals on the table that he was interested in doing. And he held that very loosely. And he came to us and just said, hey, am I missing anything here? Like, what do you think about this? And we let him process that stuff. Michael, I don't know about you, but that is hard work for me to do what you did.
Yeah, it's really hard. It can be excruciating because I don't want to do the hard work unless I know that I'm going to have what I'm getting. And so how I had to look at it for me is I had to actually pretend that this was going to be a reality. When I looked at a house, this is going to be my house. So I went through and listed all the expenses that would go along with it, exactly what it would mean for me to own this house, and all the ways that affected me. But the cool thing was going through that whole process was wherever there were facts, the anxiety went down on that decision. Okay. So the more that I brought facts into the scenario, the more that I had clarity about whether or not this was even a fit for my values and what I wanted. And so that was so helpful, bringing in the facts and looking at that intensely. And if it didn't work, it didn't work. I could walk away. I wasn't living in this in-between zone of what if.
That's a great point, Michael. And because it already aligned with the vision that you have for Lydia and your kids, it aligned with the values of being more free and flexible. Then you just move to that step 2 of, okay, I'm going to do the work. I'm going to spend some time crunching numbers, putting the pen to paper, seeing if this lines up. And that was helpful to give you less anxiety, right? To really make it clear that, okay, I can step forward because this makes sense in multiple ways. And really that kind of leads to point number 3 here too, that we've talked about, is seeking outside perspective. Because what you did in this situation a couple months ago was you went through those first 2 points and then you said, okay, guys, can you rally around me here? This is what I need to unload on and talk through this decision. And as your friends, as guys who have also had rental properties, we just had a chance to come around you and say, all right, this is looking good, or maybe there's some questions here.
Chris, I remember you sharing a spreadsheet with me, a cash flow spreadsheet, which laid out the numbers very clearly. And I could see the picture of the next 2 years just by looking at that sheet. And it brought me such comfort and clarity to have that in front of me. And you shared that with me. And also, I know that I've gone through some financial situations in the past that have affected the way that I look at financial decisions. And your affirmation and the affirmation from you, McCluskey, and from you, Jamie, just helped me see that some of my thoughts and fears from the past were not grounded in facts. I was living under a little bit of fear because of how I mishandled money in the past. So that perspective from you guys who know me, and I trust you, like I would trust you with my kids, I'd trust you with my life. You guys, I'm listening. My ears are wide open, and you gave me that perspective, and it gave me that confidence to move forward. So I appreciate you guys for speaking into that situation.
Yeah, well, Michael, you weren't the guy 10 years ago that would have sat down and made a plan and gone through all those options, kind of like what Colin did. You've changed, so you're not going to make the same decisions that you did 10 years earlier because you become a different person. This process that we're talking about of seeking wisdom being number 3, why would anybody feel compelled to seek wisdom if they don't have a plan? Spend the time on that plan, come up with all those scenarios, and now you're invested, and it makes a lot of sense to, hey, who do I know that has wisdom or who has a good idea that can poke some holes into that? And now it's almost the next step naturally to seek wisdom and slide that spreadsheet over to your EFM brothers or your dad at the kitchen islands. That point of number 3 doesn't happen until we spend the time mulling over a plan and casting a vision, look at all the options, and then maybe refine it down to that the good plan. You know, Colin went from 50 ideas down to 5. McGreevy went from a whole bunch of ideas down to like the best idea. And now he's got something that he's proud of that he can share with his brothers. And we can take that plan and make it even better by asking probing questions or shine a light on something that's really good that maybe he doesn't notice in his plan.
Jamie, I'm glad you underscored that because I do think that sums up what we're covering on this episode. It is illustrative of that story that I was talking about with Colin, because I'm going to sound like a bragging dad here, and maybe I am, but it's because it does underscore that very same thing. You're right that it's terribly important that we begin with our passion. What is it that we're really excited about? It seems to make us come alive. Okay, evaluate that against your bigger vision for life and your core values for what you know is most important. If there's alignment there, then the next step we're saying is, well, crunch the numbers, analyze it several different ways, because it can meet all of those things and yet still not be right if it doesn't work out on paper. Michael Gerber in the E-Myth always says, if you can't make it work on paper, do not proceed to the next step. But when I got home last night, literally, this just happened last night. When I got home from that about 2.5, 3 hours with Colin, drove in the driveway, and it's like 10 o'clock at night. And I walk in, and my son, Drew, who is 20 years old, is sitting at his computer in our library. And he says, Dad, can you come here and take a look at this with me? And I walk over to his computer screen, and he's got plans up for the floor plan and pictures of a house that he is looking at investing in as his first real estate investment here. He's been doing all the rehab for us he's been overseeing all the work in the incubator building. So he knows what materials cost. He knows the different suppliers that we've got around here. He knows what it would take to rip out walls and rip up floors and all that kind of stuff. So he's been looking at this piece of property, and he's got a spreadsheet next to it with every single item he can identify and what it would cost. He's got the tax estimate on there. He's done comps with the other houses. He gives me a zoom out on the Google map through Zillow of all the other houses in the area. And he's done the financial analysis. It's his passion. He knows what his values and vision are for this season of his life. He's still in college. He's not married yet. He's like, I want to get into investing. I've got a specific property. Dad, would you come here and look at this and just shoot holes through it with me? So for an hour, I sat there until after 11 o'clock, looking over his shoulder, just analyzing the numbers that he'd done. He'd forgotten a couple of things. We factored those back in, ran the numbers again, and we're going to go look at a house this weekend. So I do think that sums up what we're talking about.
That is very, very cool, Chris, because that's the cool thing about that story is that he invited you in. He was literally in that point number 3 of seeking wisdom. There's Dad coming through the door who he's watched pursue these different types of real estate deals recently, and he's been involved in the process of being in charge of the expenses and all that. And so he just said, Dad, I need your help. I need your outside perspective here. And I think that's something we've each got to do for one another. And it is so important that we take those steps in the right sequence. How we talked about, make sure that it is part of your vision, part of your values. Does it align with that? Move on to step 2. Okay, do the numbers work? If they don't work, it's not going to happen, very likely. And then that point number 3, just getting the outside perspective and useful insight from those you trust, those you know. Maybe it's going to be some expert opinions too. So what is it for you? What are you working on right now? What's good? What could be the best? And how do you determine that? Who can you turn to for outside help? Before we go, we want to give a shout out to JT Weatherford. Michael, can you share what JT posted here earlier today?
Man, I am so flattered by this. This is such a nice thing to say. We just want to thank you, JT. He posted in one of the groups that we're all in, and he was sharing about some of the podcasts that he really loves to listen to. He mentioned Ransom Heart. He mentioned Art of Manliness. But the one that he likes the most is, guess what? Entrepreneurial Family Man. That if I had to pick one, I'd pick Entrepreneurial Family Man. Those guys are hilarious, and they cover a lot of good material. Plus, they're also Eagles. Well, thank you for thinking we're hilarious, JT. We're not trying to be funny, so if you're laughing at us, we forgive you. But no, seriously, thank you so much for that feedback. It means a lot, and it's for guys like you that we do this, and we love to keep adding value every week.
Yeah, thank you, JT. That is awesome, and just underscores that point. Feel free, reach out to us at efmlife.com. We'd love to connect with people, and there's a private Facebook community there where we've got interaction. If this podcast blesses you, we'd love to see you there.